Hello and welcome. I'm Light, and this is my channel. And today I'm going to tell you about a couple of stories, cold cases, that despite being investigated for sometimes decades by professionals and also the help of internet sleuths who have contributed a lot to cold cases, all the eyes and attention that have been given to these cases, despite all that, they remain cold cases. Very confusing cold cases. Before we get started, if you would please give this video a thumbs up, I'd really appreciate it. It helps the algorithm of YouTube to bring people to my channel. If you are not subscribed and you would like to be, please go ahead and click that button. And if you do so, please click the bell so you'll be notified when my content goes live. Alright, let's start talking about these cases, shall we? The charred body of a woman was found in a remote section of Norway in 1970, at the height of the Cold War. An autopsy indicated that she had taken sleeping pills before she died and inhaled carbon monoxide, and then she had been burned alive. Later, a suitcase belonging to the woman was found containing money from multiple countries. Eventually, it was discovered that she was traveling around Europe with a number of forged passports containing different aliases. The woman's burned body was discovered by a family hiking in the Isdal Valley near the city of Bergen in West Norway. She was found in a supine position, badly burned in the front, with her hands raised to her chest in an almost defensive posture. Scattered around her body were personal effects including a watch, an umbrella, some jewelry, and several empty bottles. According to the BBC, police thought the objects had been arranged around the body in a peculiar way, almost suggesting that it had been a ritual. The clothes she was wearing were made of synthetic fibers and were missing their tags. Initially, it was thought that she was likely in her 30s. An autopsy revealed that she had ingested between 50 to 70 tablets of phenobarbital, and she had bruising around her neck. She had also inhaled carbon monoxide and soot from the fire, indicating that she was burned alive. With no identifying documents and the presence of a large amount of sleeping pills in her system, Norwegian officials ruled her death a suicide. Who falls asleep and sets themselves on fire would be a question I would ask. A few days later, a pair of suitcases were found at a train station in Bergen with fingerprints that matched the dead woman's. Inside, there were an assortment of wigs, makeup, clothing, eczema cream, eyeglasses with non-prescription lenses, maps, and small amounts of money from Norway, the UK, Switzerland, and Belgium. Inside the lining of the case were 100 Deutschmarks, which is the equivalent of about 1,000 US dollars today. After careful examination of the suitcase's contents, it was found that any identifying information had been detached, cut out, or rubbed off. Even the eczema cream, which would normally have the prescribing doctor's name on it, was missing its label. Detectives did, however, find a shopping bag inside the suitcase and used it to trace the woman's whereabouts prior to her death. She had visited Norway several times during the year, staying at different hotels under fake names using forged passports. A 2017 BBC investigation found at one hotel she claimed to be Claudia Tielt from Brussels. At another, she was Elizabeth Leenhauer from Ostend. Ultimately, people who interacted with her were located and interviewed. They all described her as a beautiful, striking woman with style. She had dark hair, she was brown eyed, and she was elegant, charming, and she always paid in cash. She also spoke multiple languages, including French, Flemish, and English. She wore wigs and oftentimes seemed to be nervous or on edge. Years later, the Norwegian National Defense released records that indicated that the woman may have been traversing the country observing the testing of the then top secret anti ship Penguin missile. A fisherman may have spotted the woman watching Norwegian army troop movements. So, does the idea that she was a spy make sense? Norway in the early 1970s was a flashpoint during the Cold War. Not only did it share a border with the Soviet Union, but it also played a substantial role in helping the United States and Britain to monitor Russian nuclear testing and submarine warfare. It was well known that Russian intelligence assets were active in this country, as were elements from the CIA, MI6, and Mossad. In 1973, Mossad agents assassinated a Moroccan waiter in Lillehammer, who they mistakenly thought to be one of the masterminds of the Munich Olympic massacre. So, where is this case today? Well, in 2005, a man from Bergen came forward after seeing a sketch of the Isdal woman. 5 days before the woman's body was found in 1970, he reported seeing a person matching her description hiking on a hillside about an hour away from Isdal. She was underdressed for the weather and was being followed by two men who he said looked Southern. He reported what he saw to the police, who dismissed his statement. Before the Isdal woman was buried, a portion of her lower jaw was removed and saved. Her teeth showed signs of intricate dental work, which was extremely unusual for Norway at that time. In 2017, a stable isotope analysis performed on her teeth suggested that she was born in Nuremberg around 1930, but grew up near the border between France and Germany. The investigation of her dental work showed that it had been performed in either Central Asia, East Asia, or Southern Europe, or somewhere in South America, so basically, anywhere. The case still sparks great interest. In 2018, a podcast called Death in Ice Valley from BBC World Services and Norwegian Broadcasting Corporation was launched, and that explored the Isdal woman's death in minute detail. While the stable isotope analysis did answer some questions, like the woman's age and the country she was born in, many more still persist. Was she a spy? And if so, who killed her and why? Who was she working for? Perhaps most importantly is, why haven't any of her friends or family members or loved ones ever come forward to claim her? And our next one. On June 30th, 1999, the body of a 41-year-old man named Ricky McCormick was found in a cornfield in West Alton, Missouri. In McCormick's front pocket were 2 pages of hand-printed notes containing a complex cipher that the FBI, the American Cryptogram Association, and countless of amateur codebreakers have to this day failed to crack. McCormick was a high school dropout who, according to a family member, didn't write in code. He couldn't spell anything, just scribble. Well, where McCormick's body had been decomposing in the field for several days prior to its discovery, authorities had to use fingerprints to make a positive ID. The rate of decomposition made it difficult to determine for medical examiners the cause of his death, even after an autopsy and a toxicology report. But after considering the suspicious nature of where his body had been found, the area had been used to dump murder victims several times before, investigators classified the death as a homicide. The 2 notes police found inside of McCormick's pockets consisted of 30 lines of seemingly random letters and numbers. Some of the code contains parentheses, others are circled. McCormick was an ex-con who was semi-employed at a gas station and alternated between staying with his family and living on the streets. He also suffered from heart and lung ailments and had been collecting disability at the time of his death. His criminal record consists of a handful of misdemeanors, plus a stint in prison for statutory rape. McCormick's body was found some 15 miles from where he lived, even though he did not own a car, and public transportation did not service the area where he was found. Occasionally, McCormick was known to travel by bus to Florida, where a former girlfriend says he acted as a courier for drug runners shuttling marijuana back to Missouri. There are conflicting reports about McCormick's mental condition. According to a Riverfront Times article, while awaiting trial for the statutory rape, his public defender believed McCormick might be suffering from some mental disease or defect. She had him tested by a local psychologist who found McCormick mentally competent to stand trial. Though he was never diagnosed with any mental disorders, McCormick was considered to be street smart with an active imagination, yet also possessed a naive, childlike attitude towards the world. A few days before his death, McCormick's girlfriend stated that after he returned from a drug smuggling job in Florida, he was shaken and anxious. He went to several hospitals for treatment of chest pains and asthma in the days before his death. Some investigators believe he wasn't actually looking for medical attention, but he believed his life was in jeopardy and he was seeking a safe place to stay. So where is this case today? By 2011, the FBI's Cryptanalysis and Racketeering Records Unit had exhausted its resources trying to crack the cipher. Breaking the code could reveal the victim's whereabouts before his death and could lead to the solution of this homicide, said the FBI in a 2011 statement. There are some people, including some members of Ricky's family, that believe the notes to be the nonsensical script of a mentally disabled person. Other family members claim that Ricky had been writing in code since he was a little boy. Experts, including the FBI agent in charge of the case, assert that the notes are authentic. There were small details in the handwriting, like circles around portions of the code, that indicate that it was personal in nature, maybe even a to-do list. According to the FBI, the greatest challenge in this case is that McCormick likely intended the notes only to be read by himself. Other famous ciphers, like the Zodiac Killer, wanted their codes to eventually be cracked. Then, there is, of course, the possibility that McCormick didn't even write the code. Experts have not been able to conclusively prove that the notes are in his handwriting. It's also feasible that the code was written for him by the drug dealers he was working for, or that he was just transporting the cipher from one place to another and was completely unaware of its meaning. So, for those of you out there interested in these types of things, you're in luck, because the FBI has an entire website dedicated to the case and invites amateur code breakers to come and try and solve it. Ultimately, it's believed that the code contains information that will help catch McCormick's murderers. And our last one, which is strange. Two men. One was an American pilot and a mechanic from the Republic of Congo, boarded a 727-223 jet that was parked at the Quatro de Fevereiro airport in Luanda, Angola, on May 25, 2003. Without permission from air traffic control, they taxied the aircraft to the runway, and then they took off and flew south over the Atlantic Ocean. No trace of the men or the aircraft have ever been found. Their motive for the theft remains unknown. So, what do we know? Well, the 727-223 had been illegally parked at Quatro de Fevereiro airport for over a year, and it had accrued $4 million in fines. Once a passenger jet for American Airlines, it had been sold to a Miami-based aircraft agency and converted to transport diesel fuel to diamond mines. Most of the aircraft seats had been removed to accommodate 10 500-gallon fuel tanks. It was in the process of being converted to use by a Nigerian carrier when it was stolen. The 727 was silver and had no identifying markings aside from a blue, red, and white stripe, and a serial number that was N844AA. Despite sitting at the airport for so long, the plane was thought to be in fairly good mechanical shape. Even though the 727 was structurally sound, it still needed some basic maintenance to make it safe to fly. That's where American pilot and flight engineer Ben C. Padilla and Republic of Congo mechanic John M. Butanto came in. The two men were hired to help an Angolan maintenance team get the 727 flight ready. They had been working on the aircraft for a few weeks when around 5 p.m. on May 25, 2003, they boarded the plane. They revved the engines, and they took off with over 9,000 pounds of fuel, which would have given the plane a range of 1,300 nautical miles. According to the FBI, Padilla, who was a licensed pilot but not trained to fly a 727, was believed to be at the controls. Also, further complicating things, normally a 727-223 requires 3 crew members to operate it. The 727's last known heading was in a southwest direction towards Seychelles Islands, according to the Charlie Project, a nonprofit group dedicated to cold cases. There isn't much known about Mutantu, but there is a large number of interviews and testimony about Padilla. Family members describe him as being interested in mechanics and aeronautics at a very early age. According to Air and Space magazine, Padilla's co-workers stated that he was very well versed in aviation and really, quote, knew his way around a plane. He enjoyed working in far-flung locales from Southeast Asia to South America to Africa. One former employer, however, described him only as interested in, quote, chasing local women, and a report says that he had skipped out on a $10,000 bill from a hotel in Indonesia. The theft occurred less than 2 years after 9/11, which spurred law enforcement and intelligence agencies to frantically search the world for the plane. The prevailing notion was that the aircraft, outfitted to carry thousands of pounds of extra fuel, would make an especially potent suicide weapon. Intensive hunts were initially performed by the CIA and FBI in places like Sri Lanka and Nigeria, until suddenly in 2005 they stopped without any explanation at all. Despite numerous requests over the years from journalists and amateur investigators, both government agencies have largely declined to comment about the case. The reasons for the aircraft's theft remain murky. In an interview with Air and Space magazine, Padilla's family believes that he was either scammed or forced against his will to steal the plane. In 2009, a scorched, gutted 727 was found in Mali. It had been loaded with cocaine, flown across the Atlantic Ocean from South America, deliberately ditched in a remote part of the desert, and set on fire. Although it was not the same plane, stolen from Angola, some believe the stolen 727 could have suffered a similar fate. As for Padilla and Mutantu, there is no evidence of either man's whereabouts that has ever been found. Thank you for coming to my channel today, and please remember to give this video a thumbs up. Good night.